let's talk about the books I read in June. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ivana and I like to read. To be honest, June was a really rough mental health month, and I think the books I read reflected that, but we made it to the other side. The start of the summer here in Boston and in New England in general hasn't been really hot. It's been really cloudy, and that's why I'm wearing a sweater today. So grab your beverage of choice and let's get cozy. I'm drinking an iced matcha latte with boba. I'm really proud of myself for doing it. I kind of want to make another one after this. So in the month of June, I read 6 books, and most of them were queer, which is really exciting because June is Pride Month. But of course, we should be reading queer books all year round. And we're gonna get started with my favorite book this month and one of my favorite books of the year so far, Old Enough by Jakobson. I talked about this book in my mid-year freakout tag because I loved it so much. This is a book that really made me reflect on friendship. It really made me think about the passing of time and how we change as people. So this book is about a girl named Savannah who has recently come out as bisexual. She's in her sophomore year of college, and one day she gets a phone call from her best friend from high school, and her friend is like, oh my god, I'm getting married. And she's like, what, you're getting married? Savannah's best friend from high school goes to a different college, and Savannah has already kind of established her friend group in college. She feels like she has changed so much already, and for some reason, which we come to find out later, she's really worried about attending the wedding and all the wedding events because some things happened in her past. Now, I personally did not have a wedding. I am married. I find weddings stressful, wedding planning in general, but I love attending weddings. And Savannah's childhood BFF did give me a headache. Throughout this book, we really get to see Savannah grow into her own with the help of her friends from college. This book was executed so beautifully. It was so funny, and even though the story seems like a typical story, I think that it was done in such a way that I was just so invested. The characters felt so real. There's also like a lot of diversity in this in a way that doesn't feel forced, and a lot of conversations that Gen Z nowadays is having. And so it's like the Gen Z coming of age book. I just think this was a really good time, and it really made me reflect on my own experiences in college. And it's just a beautiful book about friendship and love. There is some romance. It's not the main focus, and it's just a really good time. Trigger warnings for sexual assault though, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, this is hands down my favorite of the month. So the next book is a YA book that really made me think more about the concept of queerbaiting, like how messed up it is, and how we shouldn't be accusing people of queerbaiting or pretending to be queer because sexuality and gender are fluid. By accusing someone of queerbaiting, you might be forcing them to come out. And this is precisely what happened to the author of this book. The book is IMOGEN, obviously, and the author of this book, Becky Albertalli, she wrote Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which was later adapted into a film called Love, Simon, which is chef's kiss. It's so good. My students love that movie. And basically Becky wrote a lot of books about queer kids, and she's married to a man. So a creator on TikTok actually called Becky out and was like, why is Becky writing all these books about queer kids? Like, who does she think she is? Like, what makes her an authority in this topic? Like, blah blah blah. And so Becky at like 40 something was essentially forced to come out, and especially when it comes to like being bisexual and bi erasure being a thing where, you know, just because you're dating someone of the opposite gender doesn't mean that you're not queer. And she was forced to come out. She was like, I genuinely like didn't know. I like wrote all these books and I genuinely didn't know. And I believe she wrote an article about it. I'll link it downstairs. I think Imogen obviously touches on that topic, and it also touches on the fact that people who consider themselves to be really progressive sometimes tend to see the world in black and white and don't really see nuance. And so I think that you can cause a lot of harm when you leave no room for nuance or questioning or for people to have discussions. I think that, again, like I said, sexuality and gender are things that are constantly in flux, and you shouldn't pigeonhole people into different categories because the world is more complex than that. So this book was pure Becky Albertalli. It's about a girl who's a senior in high school, and she goes to visit her best friend who she's been avoiding, who's a freshman in college, at her college. And her best friend in college has like this group of queer BFFs, sensing a trend here between this and Old Enough. And Imogen, who is the main character, realizes that she might have feelings for another girl, and it's just her trying to figure things out. And it's not even like, oh, like she's afraid to come out, because she does have so many queer friends who are close to her, and even her sister is queer. She's just slowly starting to come to terms with the fact that she is queer. And so I think that part of the reason why Imogen doesn't come out is because she has a friend who is constantly accusing her of being like hopelessly straight or whatever. I just think this is a good book for kids to read. I love how nuanced the conversations are in the book, and it's also really cute and romantic. I audiobooked this one on Scribd. The next book I also audiobooked on Scribd, and it is The Luis Ortega Survival Club by Sonora Reyes, who is the author of The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. So I want to preface this by saying that I am not the age demographic that this book is intended for, though I do work with teens. This book is about a girl who is a survivor of sexual assault, who gets slut-shamed by her classmates after she is assaulted, and she starts getting messages from an anonymous account and ultimately bands together with other survivors of Luis Ortega's assault to exact revenge or to find accountability for him. I think that the subject matter of this book is important. I think the representation is important too. There are so many Latina characters, which I really appreciate. There's also trans representation, and there's also selective mutism representation. The main character is selectively mute. I think this book can be really important for a lot of kids who are figuring things out. However, the writing did not blow me away. I was seeing all the hype about this book, and I think the cover is so cute and colorful. I think it's so important to speak your truth, but at the end of the day, I didn't like the writing. I thought the writing could have done better. I feel like some parts felt a little dated. Like, they kept talking about writing exposés online, when I think that like we can all agree that most teens today would rather use like a video platform, and that would reach a greater audience. But what do I know? I think this book has been really important for people, and it's just not my cup of tea. The next book that I mostly read doing jury duty, which was really stressful. People are like, oh, you're just gonna sit down, it's gonna be fine. It was really stressful. And it's A Scatter of Light by Malinda Lo. And this book is by the author of Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which I enjoyed. It is another young adult novel. It's about a girl who recently graduated high school. Something happened, and her parents just ship her off to her grandmother's house. Her grandmother's an artist who lives in rural California. And when our main character, Aria, gets to California, she falls for the gardener, who happens to be a butch lesbian, and Aria may or may not be questioning her sexuality. And the gardener, Steph, is actually in a relationship. This book is, I don't want to say it's historical fiction, but it's set in the early 2010s. Does that make it historical fiction? I don't know. I think it does, because it's 10 years, right? But it's set like right before the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage, way back when the Supreme Court cared about the rights of people. I thought this book was really immersive. It was also really romantic and messy and sad. It was also really spicy for a young adult novel. I would say this is probably new adult. I love that representation though. It was really, really summery too, and there was a lot of discussion about astronomy. I was like, okay, Malinda Lo is really smart. I don't understand any of this, but it sounds beautiful. I think Malinda Lo, for me, writes really solid books. I don't like love them, but I definitely really enjoy them, and this was just what I needed. And I recommend this if you want to get lost in a book. The next book I read was my Tetris Effect book. It was a book I listened to while playing Tetris at night before going to bed. And it is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. This book is translated from Japanese. It is a slice of life book about a housekeeper who is a single mother to a 10-year-old son. She starts working for a man who is older, who is a former mathematics professor, who suffered from a traumatic brain injury and whose memory resets like every 90 minutes. This book draws a lot of parallels between math and real life, and it's really philosophical. I think if I was physically reading this book, I would have DNF'd it because I suffer from math anxiety like most people in this nation. However, because I was listening to it, it was really comforting, I think it was really especially sweet, the relationship that the professor has with the housekeeper's 10-year-old son, whom he nicknames Root because the top of his head, or maybe like his hair, looks like a square root. He has like this obsession with prime numbers too, and the professor teaches both Root and his mom about math. And I think that the way that Ogawa weaves math into everyday life is really masterful. The book was precious, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't shed a little tear right at the end. The last book that I read was Goblin Girl by Moa Romanova. This is translated from Swedish into English. This was recommended to me by marijuanerareads on Instagram. I picked it up because I liked the colors and the art was funky and the proportions are all off. This kind of reminded me a little bit about It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth, where the author depicts people in the book as like different animals or like different creatures. I thought this was really hilarious. There's a scene where she's showering and she uses like a Lush shampoo, and you know how in Lush products they add like a sticker that says like this was made by Jerry and like a picture of Jerry, like a cartoon picture of Jerry. She like pictures herself like kissing Jerry. It was just weird. In a funny way. But more seriously, this deals with mental health. The main character in this book is an artist who struggles with panic attacks, and she finds herself a sugar daddy patron who is willing to chat with her and also give her money to help her pursue her art. This book was really crass. I really enjoyed it. It kind of ends abruptly. It was still a really interesting read. I really do highly recommend it. So this is a shorty. Those are the books I read in June. Let me know if you are interested in any of them or if you have any recommendations for me. I think July is going to shape up to be a much better reading month. And I'm wishing you a really great day or night. Peace.